Mensches in the Trenches is a book that has been worth the wait. There were many Jews who in a quiet way fought the apartheid system in South Africa. Inspired by Trevor Celebi, the SA Jewish Board of Deputies took the idea full steam ahead. Today, we meet David Sachs and author Jonathan Anser, who put the book together.
Well, Mensches in the Trenches is the name of a book we have just brought out, and it tells the story of Jewish anti-apartheid activists, but not the mainstream well-known figures, but literally the ones who are in the trenches, the foot soldiers who are on the coalface of fighting apartheid in various ways, and whose names are, generally speaking, not known by the general public. And they really have their own stories to tell, very interesting stories and inspiring stories.
It's also to remember people that are in danger of being forgotten. So people like Solly Sachs, somebody like Jock Izakowitz, who he had an enormous role. He was detained, he was imprisoned, he was banned, and people don't know about his contribution, and so to make sure that they're part of our historical and political record.
Well, we were approached by Trevor Celebi, who was a former anti-apartheid activist himself, and he had received a great deal of assistance during that time from members of the Jewish community, plus the people he worked with. A lot of them were Jewish, and he wanted to tell the story. He was actually the original author, and he did the groundwork, did the first round of interviews. Unfortunately, for health reasons, he had to drop out, but then we found Jonathan to pick up the reins. And in the book, there's a foreword by Trevor, just talking about his motivation for the whole project.
Reading through the book, the way that he captured the life spark of each of the individuals is brilliant. In just a few pages, exactly what it is that they wanted to do, what they wanted to accomplish. And it's just such a pity that, I didn't get to meet them when they were in full flight, because they all sound like they were incredible human beings. And it's vital that we have this. I mean, I know that we're 30 years, into our democracy, but we have to remember the road that it took to get here.
I think the project, all in all, took a year, more or less. My first port of call was always to try and interview the people, and if they had already died, was to interview their family members. And that was very important, that it wasn't just working from archives, but going to people and letting them share their stories. They were conscientious objectors, they were journalists, archaeologists, an architect, all sorts of people who played a role. And then I would augment those interviews with searching through archives and press clippings and books. And then the writing process, I divided it into themes, mostly trying to be chronological, so from the trailblazers, the trade unions and the torchbearers, right through to the students that got involved in the 80s and 90s.
My initial response was like, well, why me? Do I have to do it? And then I said yes because I think there's a story to be told, the student activists and the role of the student movement in the anti-apartheid struggle, and so not even just from a kind of Jewish point of view, but just the point of view of the students that were involved in that struggle. And maybe in a way what it's making me think about is how important it is for us to maybe tell the story.
When I approached people to be interviewed, interestingly, most of them, probably all of them, weren't quite sure why they had been included, and I think that does speak to their modesty. But I think there was a sense of people enjoyed reflecting on their involvement. Of course, there's always the sense of we should have included more people, and it's by no means a definitive list of the people who were involved. And hopefully, it's a way to start to record other people's stories, and maybe there will be a second volume and a third volume, or maybe there's an opportunity to find an avenue to tell more stories of people's involvement. Speaking to the people that I interviewed, it was quite clear to me that their Jewish identity, their Jewish background was an influence for them to get involved. So a lot of them, there is the sense, this Jewish ideal of justice And I think that came out strongly.
I think this book is an important initiative, but it's just the start. Even amongst Jews, I think the extent to which Jews, ordinary Jews, who in very humble ways couldn't tolerate the system, the racist system, and, made moves to do what they could in their own little way to unsettle, to transgress, to try and break down that rigidity in their own spheres of experience. It's important to retrieve that because I think it changes the perception that this was a community which in its entirety was simply reactionary.
Look, I think the ideals of non-racialism are still valid in South Africa. We've become a highly polarized society, and I think such stories do help in terms of building and showing people that it wasn't necessarily one race that was fighting for something. There were people who believed in these ideals. So how do we reimagine and start to see one another as one? And how do we build on that? So a book like this contributes a lot.
If we don't know where we've come from, we've lost a lot of stories, a lot of our history, and I think it's absolutely essential that we don't forget what happened, and we acknowledge people who were brave, who were prepared to stand up. I really am a strong believer in telling stories, and I think this is a Jewish tradition of storytelling that needs to be continued. And I think that this generation of people who played a role, they're sort of passing on, and I think we need to record their stories and have a written collection of their memories.